President Donald Trump has issued a sweeping ultimatum: nearly every nation faces new U.S. tariffs unless they grant greater market access by August 1, 2025. This move disrupts decades of global trade norms, putting all countries, regardless of size or alliance, on notice. The threat has rattled financial markets worldwide, with investors bracing for a possible global trade war. Multinational corporations are scrambling to rethink supply chains, anticipating higher costs and major disruptions. For everyday people, the stakes are real. Prices on goods from electronics to groceries could surge, both in the U.S. and abroad. The world now faces a stark choice: yield to U.S. demands or risk economic retaliation. This bold gambit is forcing a global reckoning over the costs and consequences of economic nationalism. At the core of Trump's strategy is the America First doctrine, prioritizing U.S. interests above all else. The administration claims decades of unfair trade have hurt American workers and fueled a massive trade deficit. Rejecting multilateralism, Trump favors direct bilateral deals, using tariff threats as leverage to open foreign markets. Supporters see this as a long-overdue correction, promising a revival of U.S. manufacturing and jobs. Critics warn it's a risky break from the post-war order, trading global cooperation for confrontation. The administration frames any short-term pain as a necessary sacrifice for long-term American prosperity. Nations worldwide now face a dilemma: retaliate against U.S. tariffs or concede to avoid economic pain. Major powers like the EU and China threaten counter-tariffs targeting politically sensitive American exports. But a trade war risks global economic damage, higher prices, and inflation for all sides. Some smaller countries consider concessions, hoping to escape tariffs but risking further U.S. demands and domestic backlash. Most are hedging, publicly condemning the ultimatum while quietly negotiating for exemptions. Alliances are strained as countries weigh national interests against defending the global trade system. The coming weeks will test whether the world unites against U.S. pressure or fractures into competing blocs. The stakes for the global economy have rarely been higher. Alongside trade, Trump's second term has seen a dramatic escalation in U.S. deportation policy. The administration has moved beyond traditional enforcement, introducing measures that have sparked heated debate both at home and abroad. These new strategies are not just about removing individuals from U.S. soil, they represent a fundamental shift in how America handles those it deems undesirable, especially non-citizens with criminal records. Now, when a non-citizen with a serious criminal record cannot be sent back to their country of origin because that nation refuses to accept them, the U.S. has begun deporting them to third countries. These are often nations with which the deportees have no personal, cultural, or familial ties. The process is swift and often shrouded in secrecy, leaving many detainees uncertain about their fate until the last moment. This approach, justified as a matter of national security, involves secretive deals, sometimes with financial incentives, to persuade countries like El Salvador to accept deportees. These agreements are rarely made public, and the details are often classified, raising concerns about transparency and accountability. Critics say these deals prioritize political expediency over human rights. Critics argue this outsources detention and creates stateless individuals, severing their ties to any nation. Many deportees find themselves in legal limbo, unable to access basic services or reunite with family. Human rights organizations warn that this policy risks violating international law and could leave vulnerable people exposed to danger or exploitation. The policy raises ethical and legal questions. What rights do these deportees have? Can they ever return home, or are they permanently exiled? Immigration lawyers and advocates are scrambling to provide answers, but the legal landscape is murky and constantly shifting. What responsibility does the U.S. retain? As the architect of these removals, does America owe ongoing support or protection to those it has displaced? Lawmakers are divided, and the debate has reached the highest levels of government. Sending people to countries where they have no connection marks a sharp break from international norms. For many, it means starting over in a place where they may not speak the language or understand the culture, with little hope of building a new life. The implications are profound, transforming deportation into a tool of diplomatic leverage. The U.S. is using its influence to pressure other nations, sometimes offering aid or concessions in exchange for accepting deportees. The world is watching as the U.S. tests the limits of sovereignty and human rights. As this controversial strategy unfolds, its impact will be felt not just by those deported but by the global community grappling with questions of justice, responsibility, and the true meaning of borders. The policy's reality hit home in July 2025, when 5 deportees from 5 different countries were sent to Eswatini, a small African monarchy. All had serious criminal convictions, and their home countries refused to take them back. Eswatini, with a poor human rights record, agreed to accept them after months of U.S. negotiations. Critics say this contradicts America's stated values and puts deportees at risk. Eswatini claims it will work with international agencies to eventually send them to their home countries, but details remain unclear. This case sets a precedent, raising alarms among human rights groups and legal experts. The fate of these 5 will shape the future of third-country deportations. Trump's deportation policy has sparked fierce legal battles. Civil liberties groups argue it violates U.S. and international law, especially when deportees face danger abroad. Courts have issued injunctions, blocking deportations to places like Libya and forcing last-minute diversions of flights. The administration has fought back, appealing rulings and asserting broad executive authority. In June 2025, the Supreme Court sided with the administration, lifting a key injunction and allowing deportations to proceed. The decision split the court, with dissenting justices warning of risks to human rights. Legal challenges continue, focusing on due process and the speed of removals. The courts remain a battleground over the balance between security and individual rights. Critics warn that the rapid pace of deportations is eroding due process, a core American value that has long been seen as a safeguard against government overreach. The right to a fair hearing, legal representation, and the opportunity to present evidence are all fundamental principles that are now being called into question. Many legal experts and advocates argue that these protections are being sidelined in the name of expediency, raising concerns about the integrity of the justice system. Some removals happen with as little as 6 hours' notice, leaving little time for legal defense or for families to prepare. Lawyers often scramble to gather documents and contact witnesses, but the accelerated timelines make it nearly impossible to mount an effective case. For many, the process feels rushed and impersonal, with life-altering decisions made in a matter of hours. A leaked ICE memo revealed that deportations can proceed without assurances against torture or persecution in the receiving country, raising alarm under international law. Human rights organizations warn that this practice may violate treaties the United States has pledged to uphold, such as the Convention Against Torture. The lack of oversight and transparency has only deepened fears about potential abuses. Many deportees are left stateless, isolated in countries where they have no ties, language, or legal status. Stripped of support networks, they face enormous challenges in finding housing, employment, or even basic safety. For some, the prospect of returning to a country they barely remember is both frightening and disorienting, compounding the trauma of separation. Human rights groups say these policies inflict lasting harm, tearing families apart and exposing individuals to abuse, exploitation, and even violence. Children are often the most affected, suffering emotional distress and uncertainty about their futures. The ripple effects extend far beyond the individuals deported, impacting entire communities. The focus on criminal records often ignores the complexity of cases. Some have served their time and rebuilt their lives, becoming productive members of society. Many have families, jobs, and deep roots in their communities. Advocates argue that a one-size-fits-all approach fails to recognize the potential for rehabilitation and redemption. The new approach offers little room for mercy or nuance, drawing sharp criticism at home and abroad. Lawmakers, activists, and international observers have all voiced concern about the direction of U.S. immigration policy, warning that it undermines the nation's reputation as a beacon of justice and fairness. America's moral standing is now under intense scrutiny as the world watches to see whether the country will uphold its values or continue down a path that many see as unjust and inhumane. Trump's America First agenda is straining U.S. alliances and reshaping global diplomacy. Once reliable partnerships are now marked by uncertainty, as traditional allies question America's commitment to shared values and mutual defense. The world is watching as the U.S. redefines its role, no longer the predictable anchor of the international system. The tariff threat has bred distrust, even among close allies like Canada, Germany, and Japan. These nations, once confident in their economic and security ties with Washington, now find themselves recalibrating their strategies. Behind closed doors, leaders express concern about the reliability of U.S. commitments, and public statements are increasingly cautious. Treating friends and rivals alike as economic competitors is testing historic bonds. Decades of trust are being eroded as negotiations become more transactional, and the spirit of cooperation gives way to suspicion. Allies are left wondering if they can still count on the U.S. in times of crisis. The third country deportation policy adds new friction, forcing nations to choose between U.S. relations and ethical concerns. Human rights advocates and diplomats alike warn that these policies undermine the moral authority the U.S. once wielded, making collaboration on global challenges more difficult. Bypassing international institutions, the U.S. signals it no longer feels bound by the rules-based order it once championed. This departure from multilateralism sends shockwaves through the global community, raising questions about the future of international cooperation and the stability of long-standing agreements. This shift encourages other countries to act unilaterally, risking a more chaotic world. Without a clear leader to set the tone, nations may prioritize their own interests, leading to fragmented alliances and unpredictable outcomes on the world stage. Regional blocs are strengthening, and some nations are deepening ties with China or seeking autonomy from Washington. As the U.S. steps back, new power centers emerge, shifting the balance of influence and creating fresh opportunities for rivals to fill the void. The U.S. risks isolation, even as it seeks to assert dominance. Its voice grows quieter in international forums, and its ability to shape outcomes diminishes as others band together in response to American unpredictability. The long-term diplomatic costs may far exceed the short-term gains. As trust erodes and alliances weaken, the U.S. faces a world less willing to cooperate and more prepared to challenge its leadership at every turn. The summer of 2025 marks a turning point, with the U.S. upending the global order on trade and immigration. Trump's ultimatum to nearly 200 nations is more than a tactic. It's a challenge to the foundations of globalization. America first asserts national interest over collective responsibility, using economic and immigration policy as blunt instruments. The world's response is fractured. Some prepare for confrontation, others seek compromise. Legal and ethical controversies from Eswatini to South Sudan expose deep divides over human rights and the rule of law. The choices made now will echo for years, potentially unraveling decades of cooperation and stability. The world watches, uncertain of what comes next.